Welcome to AI Tooling's Only the Starting Point. Accelerate AI operationalization with a data-driven approach. This webinar is hosted by Lean Agile Intelligence. My name is Michael McCalla. I've spent about 15 years in the management consulting space, helping organizations navigate large-scale transformation. During that time, I've worked with a number of organizations, assisting them with enterprise agile, transformation, product operating model implementations, and now AI initiatives. I'm known for a pragmatic and adaptable approach. Change is hard. Came up through the product ranks, so I'm a bit of a data nerd. I believe in the power of data to tell a narrative, provide a single source of truth, and give leaders the insights they need to make better decisions. I've had much more success in creating impact with a data-driven approach. So in 2016, I founded Lean Agile Intelligence. This is an assessment and capability growth platform that helps organizations measure and scale large transformation efforts, along with the capabilities that support it. For those of you that aren't familiar with Lean Agile Intelligence, it's known as LAI in the industry. We help organizations measure change and drive change in a variety of different ways. One of those ways is fit-for-purpose customization. We believe every organization is unique, each with its own set of strategy and objectives. So customization allows organizations to align the capability development directly to those priorities. We offer multi-level assessments. This includes enterprise-level assessments, team-level assessments, focused in areas such as team agility, AI productivity, and individual role-based assessments. We provide AI-powered recommended next coaching, a form of virtual coaching, I should say. We all know there's never enough subject matter experts to go around. So how do we support everyone across the organization? So LAI provides participants recommended actions to enable and accelerate growth. We provide enterprise visibility. Transformation's intangible. You can't see it, you can't feel it, and it's hard to determine whether or not you're making progress. So we provide the visibility into how effectively are new capabilities being adopted, and how are those capabilities improving over time. And then finally, we integrate with a number of work management systems to be able to connect the capability development that we're driving with the team performance and metrics that is typically stored in the work management system. Now, let's get to the topic of today and the key takeaways that we hope will help you in your day-to-day role. We're going to start by exploring what we call the AI productivity paradox. What causes it? We're going to then define what we here at LAI mean by AI operationalization and explain how it differs from a traditional AI adoption. Next, we'll look at AI operational through an organizational change lens. This will help you better understand what it is necessary to make a change and drive change. And then finally, we'll identify practical ways to accelerate AI operationalization. Before we jump into the topic, it's important to set the stage on the focus of today's presentation. So AI is going to be used to solve many different problems across the industries. The use cases will vary by company, function, team, but the outcomes are going to fall into two large buckets, okay? The first bucket is productivity, so bottom line impact. How do we use AI to reduce cost and do what we do already cheaper, faster, and better, okay? The second bucket is innovation, top line impact. How do we use AI to create new value for our customers, solve problems in new ways, and generate new sources of revenue? Today's focus is going to be on the productivity side of things. So speaking from experience, we see the benefits of AI here at Lean Agile Intelligence every day. Okay. We use it across multiple areas of our business, product management, engineering, testing, etc. I'm sure many of you here today also use it on a day-to-day in your work to make you more effective and efficient. There's plenty of proof points that AI is demonstrating value, right? I think we can all agree that it's here to stay. Um, so the question is now shifted away from it's not whether organizations are adopting AI, but instead now it's how are they using it effectively and efficiently and translating that into business value and a meaningful return on investment. Return on investment is a hot topic. Several research reports released have reached a similar conclusion. Organizations are investing heavily in AI. We all know that. But only small percentage are currently demonstrating meaningful return. So, for example, MIT's 2025 Gen AI Divide report found that 95% of the organizations that were seeing no measurable returns from Gen AI initiatives. Atlassian, company behind Jira, released its State of Teams in 2026 report in April. Only 6% of 175 executives were confident that they can clearly point to clear ROI. Deloitte found a similar pattern in their research in October of 2025, in which they found only 10% of organizations were currently realizing ROI from agentic AI. So you can see the common theme. I'm sure many of you have read similar findings, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing the same. So AI is being deployed extensively, but for most organizations, it hasn't translated into meaningful business outcomes. What's really surprising, and the irony in these reports, is AI appears to be delivering on its promise at the individual level. It's accelerating individual work, knowledge worker work, and making people more productive. So Dora's State of AI Assisted Software Development reported that out of the 5,000 technology professionals that were surveyed, 90% of them were using it at work, and more than 80% believed it increased their productivity. Atlassian found something similar, in which 89% of the executives believed AI increased the speed of work. And then finally, the Gen AI Divide report found that although 40% of companies, and this is an interesting one, have purchased an official LLM subscription, 90% of those employees at the same companies regularly use AI tools for work. Right? So that tells us that they're using their personal accounts to do work and be more productive. So the result is what we call here, and it's been called this in the industry, it's no secret. It's the AI productivity paradox, right? It's the growing gap between increased individual productivity and lagging enterprise level ROI. And when you think about that and you stop and you really dig in, it's fascinating, right? Because AI is clearly helping people, giving the statistics, go faster, but that's not translating to organizational performance. So we want to stop and we want to understand where your organization is at. That'll give us some context and provide some learning as far as where are you at on your journey and which of these statements best describes the current state. So Prima, I do see the results popping up right now, so we're good there. All right, votes are coming in, 12 of 34. We ask that everyone provide a vote. It'll certainly help us as well as help the webinar and help drive some of it. So far, enabling and applying are in the lead. Enabling being that there's tools and training available, but adoption remains at the individual level. Applying being that teams are beginning to embed AI into shared workflows. We have 24 of 35. We'll give it about another 30 seconds. We are low on operationalization, which is practices are structured, measured, and improved across teams. Okay, so the results, to be quite honest, are not shocking, right? This is what we're seeing in the industry. This is what our clients are telling us. This is what my peers in the industry have been observing. This is what we've been reading, right? That individual tools and trainings are available, and we saw that in the stats. But really, primarily, the productivity boosts are coming from the individual's use of the platform. Now we are starting to see a crossing of the chasm, if you will, towards teams are starting to embed this in the shared workflows and ways of working. And so what's great about this is a lot of this webinar is going to show you how we can go about accelerating this, right? Because you will see, obviously, this is going to be the secret sauce. All right, so I'm a bit of a change management guy, big fan of the AtGuard change model. And I think looking at AI adoption through the lens of AtGuard helps explain why many organizations aren't necessarily getting the impact they anticipated. It also gives everyone here a better understanding of where usually the adoption starts to break down. Now, for those of you that aren't necessarily familiar with the AtGuard change model, it's a practical framework. It's developed by ProSci, which is a company, and it helps individuals, teams, and organizations as a whole successfully navigate change. Okay, it's commonly used for large-scale transformations, technology implementations, process improvements, etc. In my mind, one of its greatest strengths is its simplicity. It provides a clear, structured roadmap for guiding people through change that have been tried and true. It also provides leaders the ability to identify where employees may be struggling and where they require additional support. ACAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So just to get a little bit deeper into that, awareness is about clearly articulating why the change matters, right? To the business, what objectives are we trying to achieve? Desire focuses on helping people understand why they should engage, what's in it for them. Knowledge is about educating people on what they need to do and the skills they need to apply the change. Ability then focuses on turning that knowledge into consistent day-to-day work slash capabilities so that change is actually applied in the day-to-day and achieving the desired benefit. And then finally, reinforcement is about sustaining those new capabilities over time and adapting so that the value can be optimized. Now, organizations will deploy a number of different tactics to drive each stage. Awareness being calming tactics, maybe announcing the change through town halls, leadership comms, office hours, Q&A sessions, etc. Desire, organizations typically will identify champions in each of the business unit, equip them with the information necessary to help message the change. Knowledge is typically straightforward. It's where organizations provide training, practical guidance, helpful resources. Ability is where people begin to apply that knowledge in real work. They need clear expectations, coaching, etc. And then finally, reinforcement. Reinforcement is really about setting goals, measuring them, measuring the progress against them, gathering feedback, and adapting the approach where it's needed. So this provides us a simple and practical framework for identifying where AI adoptions may be breaking down and why organizations aren't ultimately achieving the goal of AI impact. Now, I'm a big fan of simplicity. I also understand how executives consume information. So I typically group the ACR model into two broader phases. The first being change activation, okay, which includes awareness, desire, and knowledge. And that phase is about preparing people for the change and helping them understand why it matters and equipping them for what they need to get started. Okay. The second phase is what I refer to as operationalization. So this includes ability and reinforcement. This is where the change is actually applied in real work. Okay. New capabilities are developed and scaled across the organization so we can get the impact. If you layering what each of these broad phases helps drive, change activation will help drive adoption. It's going to build awareness and understanding. Operationalization is going to drive value realization. It's the application, the embedding, sustaining of the change and really driving impact. Now, what's interesting and based off of my 15 years in the transformation space, and I'm sure many of you have seen this as well. The reality is, most organizations stop really emphasizing the change after knowledge, right? And what we mean by that is really putting a lot of energy into it. They feel like once the initial rollout is complete, that emphasis will typically start to fade. Uh, and they really never fully get to operationalization. They do realize as they see the value stall that there is another step, but that's typically what I have seen in most organizations. So what that creates is what we refer to here as the operationalization gap. It's the gap between introducing and adopting a change and embedding it deeply into day-to-day work to realize value. And I think it's safe to say that given what the data is telling us, what we're hearing from our clients, what we're observing in the industry, that organizations are now facing a AI operationalization gap. What's really cool is the results of the poll align directly to this. There's most of you have a tools and training, change activation. Some of you are now starting to embed that into real work and into real work. So the folks here on this webinar, there's some validation that folks are along this journey in different spots, but also experiencing the same. So understanding the operational gap, let's just do a real brief deep dive into ability and reinforcement because it really does allow you to understand what may be happening to help drive that change and what you can do about it. So ability. Ability is about turning that knowledge, the training piece, into collective behaviors. Typically, that's the form of capabilities. We call them capabilities. It's a way of working, right? Whether that's process, practice, capabilities, etc. It's really about turning that knowledge and applying that in ways of working into the system of delivery. Now, we've learned that what's really important here is that idea of collective and behaviors. Behaviors are difficult to change, right? For those change agents out there. But we now know it's not enough for a few individuals or even a majority of individuals to become more productive using AI. The challenge then becomes creating shared ways of working across the team. So to build that collective ability, right, we need to clarify expectations. What does good look like? Right? Teams are going to need help. They're going to need some coaching. They're going to need SMEs. They're going to need helpful resources to apply that in day-to-day work. They need to be enabled so they can improve. Where are we at on this journey and what's next? What action should we take? So in other words, organizations need to create the conditions that enable teams to apply, practice, and then continuously improve. Now, directly from the ProSci website, they provide potential challenges and resistant factors to the ability stage. And those challenges are uncleared shared expectations. People may understand why the change is occurring, but not always clear what they are expected to do differently. The second there is limited coaching and support. Coaches and subject matter experts, I'm sure as many of you on this phone know, are often stretched across too many teams. Right? They simply don't have the capacity. So it's limited. Where do we spend our time? Insufficient time to practice. I'm sure this is a one that resonates with the folks here. So people are always working at capacity. When do we ever have the time to practice and apply this change so we can optimize the benefit? And then finally, systemic barriers. Another one that we all know as change agents we face. Okay, existing processes, policies, tools, they can make it difficult for people to apply the change and create new capabilities. So if we look at reinforcement now again, this is about sustaining the change, making it sticky, and adapting it for our unique context and the optimal impact. Okay, so one of the first tactics that ProSci recommends is set clear goals and measure progress. The old adage is you get what you measure. Now, we need to be very thoughtful about that. As a consultant, I'm well aware of that. But the principle does hold true, right? Because measurement creates visibility, and it helps us understand where are we succeeding and where are we struggling. It also, at the same time, creates a feedback loop in the form of data, right? Where do we need additional support? What's preventing people from going forward? Uh, and then of those barriers that are identified, there needs to be ownership from leadership of removing them. Now, some of the challenges that ProSci brings to the table here that they see, giving their experience, is that the first one here is a lack of visible performance management. So that's that lack of visibility. So without it, it's difficult to understand where progress is being made. Another major challenge is the lack of feedback loops, right? People don't always have a channel to provide a voice to provide feedback. And hopefully this isn't your case, but sometimes feedback is not necessarily considered. It falls on deaf ears. Leadership doesn't act on it, right? And discourage people. And that's going to discourage people from continuing to raise those concerns. So to bring this full circle and to provide a bit of a summary, although ADKAR is often presented as this linear stage by stage model, the reality is ability and reinforcement work together, right, in a highly iterative fashion, right? It isn't a simple one-time progress. It's empirical, right? And empiricism is all about learning by doing and adapting. And so that's really what is driving a lot of the gap, right? In the operationalization gap. Operationalization is hard, right? Organizations have to observe what's happening. They have to gather feedback. They have to experiment and adapt their approach and based off of the learning. It's not black and white. And from my experience, this is where a lot of organizations struggle with change and driving impact because they just don't know how to go about it, right? There's typically playbooks for change activation. It's not that easy from operationalization. So if you summarize all the challenges, okay, there's really 6 challenges for operationalizing AI or any change, okay? Insufficient coaching and support, unclear expectations for what do you want me to be doing, limited visibility for leadership on how is the change, where are we at, how's change doing, what type of progress have we made. There's never enough time. Most teams are at capacity to practice and apply. Weak feedback loops, right? There's not always channels for teams to provide a voice, and no clear ownership for improving adoption or realizing ROI. So ultimately, the result becomes these inconsistent practices, ways of doing things that we struggle to scale and therefore fail to generate the anticipated value. So we're going to stop for another poll because we're super interested. Um, and we want to understand, how is your organization managing AI operationalization, or is it, right? So what statement here best describes where you're at today? All right, so the results are coming in. We got about half so far. In the lead is partially supported. Some teams receive coaching and support, but practices vary across the organization. So again, that's great. More validation that you are experiencing a lot of the same things that we are talking about. Which is good for us and good for you, because the latter part of this webinar will really focus on the how. So it looks like a majority, actually, over half, have voted partially supported. There are some folks in the enable but unclear. So again, that kind of aligns to, hey, we have tools and training, but we haven't gotten really too deep into what does effective application look like to really drive results. And then we also obviously have some votes here that teams are experimenting independently and still kind of trying to find their way. Thank you for those that participated in that. All right, so where can we land from all this? Okay. Um, and how do we explain this productivity paradox? And that's why I wanted to walk you through kind of that AGCAR model, go through these polls so we can have a hypothesis and really put our finger on what do we think is causing this so that we can act on it. And ultimately, where we arrive and we believe at LAI, and a lot of data supports this, right, is that there's a disconnect. And that disconnect is individual task productivity in 2026 does not necessarily equal value delivery and therefore bottom line impact. Okay. So the focus, it has been, let's make individuals faster through tooling. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. It is a foundational step, right? But organizations don't deliver value through isolated individuals, right? A majority, let's just say. Sure, there could be shared services, et cetera. But especially on the software delivery side, right? Delivery is a team sport. And so value is delivered through interconnected workflows, cross-functional teams, the system that is the system of delivery. And then finally, change is hard, right? Changing the system is difficult. So even though when individuals become more productive, the gains can easily be absorbed by the system of delivery. Right? And to be able to tackle that requires coaching, enablement, feedback loops, visibility in the progress. And as we know, there's a lot of challenges with that we just went over. So the data that we took a look at from the 4 or 5 research reports, it also validates this disconnect. So if you look at the graph on the left from Dora, you'll see software delivery throughput and team performance, two of the highlighted highlighted organizational outcomes on the left-hand side, show the lowest level of positive impact. Atlassian also identified a similar gap. Although 85% of knowledge workers say they use AI, 29% of them, only 29% have embedded them in the daily workflows. Even more validation is when you look at the organizations that are realizing ROI, what are they doing differently? And there's a couple common themes emerged from these research reports. One, all of them made AI fluency an organizational expectation, meaning there's an established structured development program for individuals and teams that help people learn, practice, and apply. Second, they've redesigned workflows. So they haven't necessarily just bolted AI on, right? They've actually taken a step back, much more strategic, and are now looking at redesigning workflows. How do we embed AI directly in the day-to-day execution? And then third, right, there's got to be an owner. There's got to be accountability. So they establish clear ownership for that measurable ROI. So it's this aligns, right? Organizations seeing results are not simply just providing the tools. AI is incredibly powerful, don't get me wrong, right? And kind of just throwing it out there, hoping that it sticks, giving the power, sure, why not, right? But we've learned that that's not enough, right? And we need to be intentional. We need to operationalize AI by building capabilities, changing workflows, and ensuring someone is accountable. So the conclusion that we can get from this, the takeaway is ROI is not going to be achieved by rolling out ChatGPT, Copilot, or another AI tool. Okay. AI adoption, AI transformation needs to be treated as an operating model change, right? Transformational, large scale change. Okay. Right. So I like to say deployment's going to create the access that individuals need to go forward, but more or less, it's a lot more work to do to create the impact. And we're going to go through that to kind of help you. So number one, where do we focus, right? Where do we start? And I think, giving a lot of the conversations, the polls, there's going to be a lot of agreement here that any type of transformation, AI, or any large change that's going to impact the way people work is typically going to require what I like to call new ways of working capabilities. They can be process, practice, it doesn't matter, right? It's a way people are working together. And, foundationally, to achieve that, individuals need to be enabled, they need the right tooling. It's a foundational step. But on top of that, in today's organizations where value is delivered through teams and team of teams, that's that TFTs, right? And what I'm talking about there, if you're familiar with the Agile space, release trains, product groups, value streams, encapsulated team of teams that are working together to deliver value. This is where we need to focus our time. And so the next step here is now that the individual foundation, the individual fluency, and that needs to be continued as well. But we really need to now focus on the team of teams to be able to get effective and efficient practices, right? Oh, by the way, AI costs money. And the more tokens you use now, the more money it costs. So we need to be able to be efficient in the way that we use AI, the way we prompt it, so we're not spending a lot of money and driving up cost. Right? So to bring this full circle, one of the ways that you can bridge that operationalization gap is focusing on these new ways of working at the team and team of teams level, right? And from an AI perspective, it's really AI assisted ways of working where you're using AI to do things more effectively and efficiently. And you could be doing that within the team level, and maybe it's augmenting your efforts, or agentic AI where you're creating agents, right, that are doing work, but there needs to be a human in the loop, which that's a whole nother topic. But that's the idea here. How do you drive it? How do you drive AI operationalization and really accelerate it? So again, if we revisit those challenges, the challenges from ProSci, right? It's insufficient coaching and support, unclear expectations, limited visibility, insufficient time to practice, lack of feedback loops, and no clear ownership. So how do we attack them? How do we mitigate the risk of them? And the answer and the path forward is, from our experience, really driving it through a structured, intentional, and data-driven approach. Okay? Because again, operationalization, the system that is an organization system, is complex. So what we want to be able to do is simplify that, allow us to be able to navigate the empirical nature of it, and help us be able to use our resources to the fullest and enable them. So AI operationalization requires these three elements. Okay. Structure is going to give you a clear understanding, a framework, if you will, for the journey. And frameworks have their place, right? But it's more about the structure and the guardrails. Okay. And in there, you really want to define what new ways of working capabilities, right, that are AI assisted or agentic, do you want us to be able to define? There's a lot of debate on, is there a best practice? Okay. It's hard to argue with, shared. When I talk about best practice, I talk about it in a shared way. I talk about it being consistent. I talk about being extendable. But you need to be able to get those people on the same page. And so that structure and providing the clarity on what we need for you to build. What we need is really important, not necessarily how you go about doing it. We want to empower our teams to do that. But there is best practices and capabilities we need in place, right? Such as responsible AI, value management of AI. Are we prioritizing use cases correctly? These are best practices. And so this helps address that unclear expectation challenge, right? It really provides clarity on, here's what we want you to do and here's what good looks like. The next one is about being intentional. Okay. And this is a deliberate approach to building and applying new ways of working capabilities. And we need to be able to provide targeted enablement. So training at the highest level is going to provide that foundational, but applying it isn't always straightforward, as you know. So what do certain teams need help with? How do we give them targeted enablement? And then we got to give them the space to create time and opportunities. This needs to be baked in to their capacity planning. If you're working on a quarter by quarter schedule or a sprint by sprint schedule, right? How do we bake this time in to make change? Okay. Because a lot of times, and this is the agilist in me, sometimes we have to slow down to go a lot faster in the future. So the challenges this addresses is that insufficient coaching and support, right? So if you're struggling with this specific capability, here are some things to try. Okay. You can use AI to provide targeted recommendations. It's very powerful that way. And baking the time in to make change is also addressed. And then finally, being data driven. So being data driven is going to provide an evidence-based understanding of current state and progress. In other words, it's going to drive visibility on how are we doing in the change. It's going to help inform where we should be putting our resources and investing. Okay, so it's not ad hoc. It's not based off of someone's feelings. It's an aggregation of data across the system to identify patterns and then be able to make decisions. And to do that, you need to measure. You need to measure the adoption. You need to take a look at performance metrics. You need to create feedback loops and establish ownership of who owns that growth. So this is going to address that limited visibility piece, the weak feedback loops, and no clear ownership. Now, this is where our expertise comes in. Okay. Now, we're not necessarily talking about LAI here. I want you to get value from this. I don't want this to be a commercial. But one of the techniques that you can use to help gain visibility and drive this is this idea of AI productivity assessments at the team level or the team level, because that's going to provide the structure, the intentionality, and provide you a measurable system of continuous improvement. Now, I probably know what you're saying. Oh, our teams hate assessments, they go like this because it's because they feel like they're being judged. And I'm biased, but assessments can be such a powerful vehicle to drive change and accelerate impact. Okay. It's just that they need to be presented and positioned in the right way. Okay. People will engage more when they see that assessments are helping identify barriers, right? Guiding improvement, securing the support they need. Right. So if you position them as, hey, this is a conversation, you can even, we want you to participate. Okay. We want a baseline, right? It's not necessarily an audit or a grade. It's a guide for performance. It has nothing to do with HR. And we're looking to really improve the system of work, not blame. If you position them in the right way, they can be incredibly powerful to help provide the insights to accelerate impact. Okay, so you're not assessing whether the team is good and bad. You're assessing whether the environment, workflows, and capabilities provided by the change are actually enabling them to succeed. Okay, and I know that may be a leap for you, but I hope that you can see the power there on how it provides it. And I just want to show you an example. And again, this could be done in Excel, it could be done in Google Forms, it could be done within our platform, LAI. And so I'm just going to use some screenshots of LAI to show you what I mean. So the first one is structure, right? So what are the capabilities we need to get good at, and what are the expectations? And so if you look here, this is from our delivery AI enablement and productivity assessment. It assesses things like, do you have the tools and the data access that you need and the infrastructure? Are you using responsible AI? Is there governance, right? And a lot of times these things will come down from the top and be inherited, and that's okay. Are they in place? Are they clear? Are they being actually applied? AI fluency. Do you understand AI, the prompting, how to evaluate output? Value management. We need value management in everything we do. How are we discovering use cases, prioritizing use cases? And then in the delivery aspect of things, we talk about AI assisted engineering, testing, and product management. And so what we do here is you provide these, here's what we feel is foundational for you to succeed and help us drive impact and also to help us scale. What one of these looks like is we provide direction. Okay. Here's what good looks like, and here's the path to improvement, the behaviors that you should be focused on and changing, and the capabilities and the practices you should be adopting. We have a 5-stage model, just like many, and we provide context, right? Our biggest thing, and you can see this is very aligned to what we said, that emerging is, hey, multiple contributors are independently providing prompting or using AI. Operationalization is starting to get into that shared, consistent teams. Optimizing is starting to focus on, are we making it better? Are we seeing impact in metrics? And then transforming is really about driving and going towards being a leader within your organization. One of the things we believe heavily on is to provide examples. We're fully customizable, so whoever uses LAI can customize these examples. But then it provides some context as well as, what do we mean by that? But you can see the idea here is, this is what we want you, this is what we need you to achieve to help us scale. You can see it really focuses on the what, right? The how will come in the actions, and teams are empowered to figure out the how because they're unique. Then we measure it. Where are you at on this journey? Again, creating a safe space. And we baseline it initially, and then we drive from there. So they'll measure themselves, select one of these stages, and then be able to say, here's where we're at in this capability. And then we can look at scores across the teams, across the org, and we accumulate them. Enable improvement. So this is the how. This is how do we go about improving it. And like I said, every team is going to be different. So what we do in LAI is we have an AI coaching virtual coach who provides recommended next steps. And the participants can sit there, and it's typically a team, and they can go through this and see which one of these applies most to us, which one of these makes the most sense to experiment with, and then they can convert that to what we call an improvement action. So something that's going to be done about it to get better. And then finally, we want teams to take action, and they need to make time to do these improvements. So being able to say, here's the capabilities that we're focused on. Here's what we're going to do to help us accelerate the growth. And then an owner is assigned, but ultimately it's the team working together, right? So to recap, we define capabilities that teams need to adopt, and we can provide them guidance, right, on what the step-by-step path to success looks like. Very much the what. And then within the how, we provide in the form of AI recommendations how they can go about getting better, getting from one step to the next. And they're empowered to select what they want to do. And then we measure the progress, which is the third step here, right? Being data driven. We always want to be able to track trends, not necessarily absolute numbers. And we want to, whenever we're talking about data, we want to also look at patterns, not one-offs. And so what we do at LAI is we provide different types of scoring at each team level. We roll those teams up to the team of teams so you can see how they're doing holistically. Team of teams then roll up to portfolios, portfolios then run up to organizations. But this is the type of reports that we provide on how are we trending? Where are we stuck? You can then drill down and see comments and notes and actions. But you can see this is providing the structure that you need to truly operationalize AI. So to tie this directly back into AgCar, one of the things that you can do to help drive the operationalization, right, is, and even starting in knowledge, is to show them the new ways of working capabilities from an AI assistant standpoint that they should need to be focused on and what the path is and what's there to help them. Then you can learn by doing. So once they start applying this and they start to build upon that baseline, where are they finding issues? And how do we quantify that? Well, we need to be able to rate them, score them, and use that information in a correct way, right? Not an audit, but more about improvement, setting goals and measuring. So this is kind of where this vehicle, quote unquote, tactic can be used. This is a quick commercial here, right? LAI has 3 assessments. We have a readiness assessment, right? We have a enablement and productivity assessment for all teams, not just software delivery teams. We have a delivery and enablement productivity assessment. These were released about 5 months ago. And they are almost done beta, but we are actually opening up another beta program, another cohort, to be able to provide some assistance on the second wave of these. Prima, do you have that poll? We're offering this. We want to get feedback. Everyone is welcome to participate free of charge. What we're looking here is a reciprocal relationship, right? You providing us feedback, and at the same time, hopefully we're providing you value to help bring some visibility into the adoption, some structure, and being able to drive it with intentionality. right? Um, and it's a quick lift. It's we can get you up and running within an hour, and you get up to three teams to experiment with, play with, and all we ask is for a little bit of feedback. Um, so 9 out of the 25 so far. If you haven't yet responded to that, um, if you can just take some time and respond, we would appreciate it. We are finishing on time, and we have left a few minutes for Q&A. Um, and so I'm going to provide a quick summary to hit home on this. I'm going to ask that if you can take some time before you leave, we didn't want to kill you with polls, but just provide some feedback if you found this interesting, how it's going to help you. We're super interested in that. And we thank you for your attendance. And to summarize here, and Prima, you can keep that open. I think we still have some people voting. Uh, Overall, here's the story and the narrative. AI investments have not yet delivered expected ROI in most organizations. Okay. Ironically, individual knowledge workers are reporting it is making them more productive, okay, and making them more effective, more efficient. So we can easily conclude that individual task productivity is not necessarily equal to value delivery and impact of the bottom line. So it requires the next step, which is operationalization. And the way you implement operationalization is through large transformation efforts that are hard, right? And because it's so hard, the path is going to require a very structured, intentional, and data-driven approach so you can create clarity on where are we at. You can deploy your resources to where they add the most value. You can run workshops and on the patterns. You can remove systemic issues, right? You have the data to show leadership on where people are struggling and what the impacts are. And a vehicle to achieve this structured and intentional approach is this idea of team level assessments or team of teams. It's a mechanism. It could be anything. It could be a platform like ours. It could be a simple Excel sheet, a Google form. But this will give you the data you need to start driving it. It also is a way to drive organic growth and help scale this and drive consistency where it's needed. Um, I want to thank you for coming today. Um, Again, we have that free beta program. Feel free to take a snap of this or reach out to us about any time. We also support agility, team agility assessments, product assessments, right? Lots of product operating models out there being implemented, right? We have a product essentials assessment that's very popular. So if you like to talk more, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, we're going to be running that beta program. And I'll stop it now for any type of Q&A.